The silence inside the workshop was different. Not empty. Full. Full of the heat stored in the stones, the smell of tempering oil, and an anticipation that held Clara's breath captive. She cradled the sword she had just finished polishing, her stained hands trembling slightly, not from cold, but from a hope so intense it almost hurt. Master Thomas watched from his wooden bench near the open doorway. The orange light of the setting sun cut through the workshop's darkness, illuminating exactly where Clara stood. He said nothing, just watched. His eyes traced every inch of the blade she raised with such care, as if presenting a newborn to the world. "It's ready, Master," Clara said, her voice slightly hoarse. "Everything done the way you taught me, the fire, the hammer, the tempering. I think it's perfect." The last word echoed through the room, carrying a deep, aching desire. She offered the sword handle first, in a gesture of total surrender. Thomas accepted it without rushing, and without saying a word, he walked to the cold anvil and delivered a single dry strike against the steel edge. What happened next was not an accident. It was a revelation. What if your greatest effort was, from the very beginning, destined to reveal something you didn't want to see? Not for lack of dedication, but because an invisible weakness already lived inside what you built. Today we follow the hardest lesson an apprentice can receive, the moment when the first real difficulty doesn't break your work. It only shows what was always broken. If you're willing to face this truth, hit that like. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a single step of this journey. Now come back with me to the workshop. At the exact moment, the sound of yielding metal changes everything. The sound was not a crack, it was a groan. A deep and painful noise that came from the core of the blade and filled the workshop. The sword didn't split in two. It bent. The blade that 1 second before had seemed straight and strong now showed an ugly, irreversible curve like a dislocated bone. Clara raised her hand to her mouth. Her eyes went wide, but no sound came out. It was a silence of pure shock. Her world, built through weeks of sweat and focus, had just collapsed in a single movement. Thomas raised the deformed sword, studying the curve in the dim light. His expression was not one of disappointment. It was one of recognition, like a doctor seeing an X-ray confirm a long-suspected diagnosis. But how? Clara's voice finally came out, a fragile whisper. "I followed everything. The fire temperature was exact. I hammered until the metal sang. The tempering was done at the right moment." Her words trailed off, as if she were reciting a spell that had failed. "You followed the movements, Clara," Thomas said, placing the twisted sword on the anvil with almost funeral care. "But the forge is not a dance where the right steps guarantee the perfect music." He pointed to where the curve had formed. "The flaw didn't begin here at my strike. It began back at the start. In the first heating, when one section of the metal didn't reach the same temperature as the other. A minimal difference. Invisible. You didn't see it. The fire didn't reveal it. The hammer didn't correct it." Clara stepped closer, touching the cold blade with her fingertips. "A difference in temperature," she repeated, as if deciphering a code. "Exactly," Thomas confirmed. "And it lay dormant inside through every hammer blow, every plunge into the fire, every pass of polish. Hidden, sleeping, until it met the first real resistance." He paused, letting the weight of the words settle. "The difficulty didn't create the flaw, apprentice. It only removed the disguise." Clara sat heavily on the nearby bench. The exhaustion of weeks fell onto her shoulders all at once. "So all my work was useless? Because of a mistake at the beginning?" Thomas looked at her, and for the first time a flicker of gentle compassion appeared in his severe eyes. "No, it was necessary. Because now you're no longer looking at a sword, you're looking at the truth. And the truth, even when ugly, is the only real material we have. Stay with me, because now we're going to dig deep to find the origin of that flaw, and you'll be surprised by what it reflects in your own life. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell." Thomas didn't try to fix the sword. Instead, he picked up a thin chisel and a light hammer. "Let's do an autopsy," he said, without humor. He positioned the chisel along the line where the metal had bent and gave one precise tap. A thin flake broke away. He held it up to the window light. "Look here," he instructed Clara. "Do you see these lines? This different grain pattern?" Inside the metal, she saw it. The pattern was not uniform. On one side, the steel grains were small and tight, a texture like snow. On the other, they were larger and irregular, like wet sand. "They're different," she said. "Because they cooled at different rates," Thomas explained. One side stayed soft longer. The other had already begun to harden when the two met under the hammer. They joined, yes. They created the appearance of unity, but they never became one thing. He handed the flake back to her. "This is how everything we build in a hurry works, Clara. We mix elements that are not at the same point. A decision made in the heat of enthusiasm with another made in the cold of fear. A new habit forced to coexist with an old belief we never dissolved. They appear integrated, until the first real blow of life." Clara closed her hand around the cold metal flake. The metaphor was painfully clear. She thought of the project she had abandoned when the first obstacle appeared, the relationship she had given up trying to fix at the first serious argument. She had always blamed bad luck or the difficulty of the moment. Now a new horrifying question arose. What if the crack had already been there? "How did I not see it?" she asked, more to herself than to him. "Because you were looking at the form, not the consistency," Thomas replied. "You were fascinated by the glow of hot metal, the rhythm of the hammer, the dramatic smoke of tempering. Those are the spectacle. The real forging happens in the invisible, in the patience to wait for heat to penetrate every millimeter, in the attention to hear a different sound on impact." He turned, facing her directly. "The first difficulty you face in anything, a project, a relationship, a change within yourself, is not your enemy. It's your most honest messenger. It's shouting, 'Look here,' at what you ignored in your rush to appear ready." "Pick up that bent sword," he said then, "and tell me, what do you see in it now?" Clara lifted the flawed object. She no longer saw a ruined piece. She saw a diagram, a map of a mistake. "I see haste," she began slowly. "I see that I was so eager to see the sword finished that I didn't respect the metal's time, that I rushed through stages. I see that I was afraid of getting the fire temperature wrong, so I probably pulled the metal out a little early. And that fear stayed inside it." "Excellent," Thomas nodded. "Fear is one of the most common impurities. It doesn't evaporate in fire. It hides in the joints. Now tell me," he continued, "where else in your life do you see this pattern? Where have you built something that appears solid, but has a poorly made joint hidden inside?" The question landed like a lance. Clara felt a chill run down her spine. She looked at the sword, then at the empty hands that had forged it. The answers came not as thoughts, but as images. The yes she had given to a job out of fear of being without income, ignoring the gut-level no her instincts were screaming. The promise to study every morning, welded to a nighttime routine that never changed. Fragile joints. "In almost everything, Master," she admitted, her voice carrying a new shame that was clean, not destructive. "I think I've spent my life hammering pieces that were never truly joined. And when they broke, I blamed the force of the blow." Thomas nodded, almost satisfied. Most people do that. They blame the boss's hammer, the partner's low blow, the market's hardness. They rarely look at the quality of the steel they chose or the heat with which they worked it. The most important work of the blacksmith is not the final strike that sharpens. It's the first look he gives to the raw ore, and the patience he has to bring it, uniformly, to the temperature of transformation. Without that foundation, everything that follows is decoration over a crack. Thomas did not discard the bent sword. Instead, he placed it carefully in a dedicated niche in the stone wall, among the other tools, treating it with respectful care as if it had earned its place. Clara watched this reframing gesture and felt something shift inside her. Then Thomas reached into the ore basket and extended his scarred hand toward her, offering a small, rough, unworked piece of raw steel. "Tomorrow, we begin again, with our eyes open." "So what is the sword that bent on your first real strike? That business plan that collapsed at the first market obstacle? The resolution to exercise that vanished in the first busy week? The patience that ran out at the first conflict?" It wasn't the strike that created the weakness. It only removed the veil. It showed where in your enthusiasm or your hurry, you joined things that were not at the same temperature, where you built on a foundation that was never whole. The question now is not, why did it break? The question is, What is the crack showing you that you refuse to see? Look at it. Study the pattern of your failure. It is your most honest map for building something true the next time. If this reflection was worth your time, hit that like. It fuels the channel's forge. Subscribe for the next lessons. And in the comments, if you have the courage, what did your last break reveal about you? Let's talk. The heat we exchange between us is what tempers understanding. Until next time, remember the fire of awareness never goes out.